Welcome to Behind the Wire with Chaplain Otto Ministries. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and we're going to be going over our nationally approved anger management class that we are currently teaching in prison. Our program is designed to help veterans and the incarcerated learn how to manage their anger. And using our course, we also provide thought-provoking scenarios to challenge the mindset. While we provide these thought-provoking scenarios, we provide evidence-based remedial actions to offset your thought process that you're so used to thinking. We believe that providing you with this information will give you the opportunity to think through a scenario versus immediately acting it out. I believe this training can allow you to move, shoot, and communicate on the battlefield of life without becoming or taking a casualty in the process. I know personally that if I don't control my anger, there are a few things that can happen. Right now, the biggest thing I'm working on is not shutting down. The biggest thing that I've grown from is exploding like a bomb. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I believe that if you practice towards positive outcomes, that you will yield less negative results. It starts and ends with your thought process. Again, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. This is something that was drilled into my head in basic training that I've used consistently throughout my professional career. Maybe you're a veteran dealing with the aftermath of combat, or maybe you're just a general civilian or a first responder that might be struggling with anger, or you could possibly be supporting someone who is incarcerated that is currently in my class. Either way, I am aiming to provide you with tools to transform your anger into a positive force. Lesson 1 is anger's many faces. And the goal for this lesson is to define anger, explore how it affects people and relationships, and start to identify triggers for anger. So let me ask you, has anger ever, separated a relationship? Has anger ever affected a relationship? Is there anybody that you're not talking to right now because you're very upset? Well, if you're thinking about them, I definitely just triggered an emotion, and I am looking forward to helping work through this process. So we have to understand what anger is. Anger is a complex emotion that can range from mild annoyance to intense rage. Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. I have definitely been there, and it's not somewhere I ever want to go back to again. See, anger is a natural response to perceived threats or injustices. While anger is often seen as a negative emotion, it can also be a powerful force for good when managed properly. What are some statistics of anger? Well, 23% of Americans admit they openly express their anger. It's not like I am doing here in the teaching environment. It's like the person that when they express their anger, they really don't care what they say, what they do. Like if they're mad, you're going to know. That is not expressing your anger in a healthy way. 39% say that they hold it in or hide it. And one thing that, I've always heard, at least as a guy growing up, is bury that. And I have found out that what happens to a seed when you bury it. So there was a lot of weed and root that I had to pull out, and things that I'm still working on. Even going through this curriculum 10 times now. 3% say that they walk away from the situation. And that's not the walk away from, we're going to come back and figure this out, see you later, never talking to you again. 23% confess to having hit someone in anger. I'm pretty sure that there have been times that I have upset somebody enough that they have definitely wanted to hit me. 17% admit that they destroy the property of someone who made them mad. And I fall most definitely into that category. However, it was my property because for some reason, a few years ago, there was a part of me that anytime that I would get mad, if something was in my hands, it was going somewhere. And it wasn't intentional, but I definitely have broke some things in my anger previously, and I'm so thankful that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, because I can professionally set things down. And, well, that actually makes it a lot easier when I don't have to replace anything anymore. Anyways, the impact of anger. Anger can have a significant effect on our lives and relationships. Anger can lead to violence both in personal relationships and society at large. I mean, anger is real, and that's why I'm teaching this in prison. For example, severe violence is a chronic feature of 13% of all marriages, and every 25 seconds, someone is a victim of a violent crime. That is alarming, and it makes you think, why don't we stop and think? Because it could be you in that moment. What kind of household did you grow up in? After spending, a year going through this course with 5 other groups, getting certified in it, now I have 4 active classes. I have come to the conclusion that just because that you experienced some type of lifestyle growing up does not mean that you'll become a product of your environment. Actually, in some cases, it's the exact opposite, and we can become what we didn't experience, but much, much worse. I am fully convinced that the thought process can be changed. I can tell you that within the last week, I was reminded of how powerful the thought-provoking emotion can be if it happens to me at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it could almost catch me off guard. The good news is that now I don't get swept off my feet, and I'm able to stand strong in the storm because I choose to. And that took time. I have definitely stumbled and fallen along the way, but holding yourself accountable and asking yourself, why did I let this affect me in that way? I did want to bring up 2 stories that I want you to think about. You will relate to one of these 2 stories. These stories are in the book that we're going through in the class right now. You don't have the book, so I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read Lynette's story. I can remember the day one of my sisters came home with a suspension slip for throwing an orange in the lunchroom. My father dragged her upstairs to the attic. There were loud noises, yelling, and crying. She limped down the stairs, bloody and bruised. I can remember the beatings in the basement with a board, my father's rage, the pain, and the fear. I can remember experiencing the cold shoulder for days when I would disappoint someone in my family. That's childhood to go through right there. Going through this course as many times as I have, I asked myself a new question when I was reading it with my participants this week. I said, if you grew up with violence in the household, if you grew up with a violence coming against you, like how did you feel if there was violence in the household, but it wasn't directed towards you, but maybe at a time before it had been? The response that I got back was fear. And that is something to really think about, is the fear of not knowing what's going to happen. And to be at such a young age for Lynette to not know what's going to happen, but to think she might know just off of previous experience. So let's move into her adulthood. I can remember my husband and I up in the attic of our 2nd-story rented flat 2 weeks after our daughter was born, screaming at each other and throwing things. I don't remember what caused the anger or why it hurt so much, but I experienced anger's pain, inner wounds, and loneliness. That is a very impactful story, and it's very interesting to see some similarities from the childhood that come into adulthood. Let's take a look at a second story, and this story is by Ted. Ted says, I long feared anger, my father's and my own. My dad, an alcoholic whose drinking kept him from connecting with his family. He had quiet anger. He didn't beat us or yell at us for hours. He just sort of ignored us. My anger, which was really years worth of bitterness towards dad, became violent, abusive, and dangerous, especially after my father died and I couldn't express my anger to the one person that I was really mad at because he wasn't around anymore. Now, I want to pause right there because it's very interesting. Ted didn't grow up with physical abuse, and it makes you think, what would you rather have if you had to choose from it? If you had to choose like physical abuse or emotional abuse? And I want to tell you that every single participant, 63 men said that they would rather go through physical abuse than ever go through emotional abuse again. And that's because emotional abuse, it can last forever. Physical goes away. Let's jump back into Ted's story. Looking back, I am ashamed at many of the things that I said and did at that stage in my life. And I thank God for helping me forgive my father and to learn how to be kind to my family, a family that I almost lost because of my rage. Now, I say this in the class, and I'm going to have to say this now because I do feel emotion. When I read this, I don't relate to the beginning of Ted's story, but I definitely relate to the end. So these last words that I'm getting ready to read are his, but every time I read them, I feel like I wrote them down myself. Not all anger is wrong. I'm going to try that again. Not all anger is wrong, but when it's like mine, only God can keep the individual from going off the cliff. This journey hasn't been easy or quick, but God has sustained me every step of the way, and he continues to do so. Not everyone turns to faith to deal with anger, but that's what made a significant difference in my life. I want to thank you so much, Ted and Lynette, for sharing these stories within the curriculum that we're learning about here today. So what is anger management? Anger management is the ability to recognize anger and develop skills to respond in a healthy and appropriate manner. Anger management involves evidence-based treatment and strategies that help individuals manage their anger effectively. What is an evidence-based strategy? Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to tell you what works for me. What works for me might not work for you, but maybe some of it will, and it will give you an opportunity to think. One thing that I always talk about as soon as we open up our class is the tire light. I found that after being in the automotive industry, that the tire light is the least addressed or thought about signal that can come up for a car within, any light that comes on. So I always say, what light's more important, your tire light or your gas light? And everyone's always like, what's going to be the gas light? The gas light's more important because it's going to get you to where you're going. And I always ask the question, okay, so would you stop, put gas in your car and fill up your tire? Most likely you'll forget because you're on the way going somewhere. And I'll get to it later. I'll get to it later. I'll get to it later. And we think that we are just, it's okay. I'll get to this later. It's something small, but something small can lead to something so much bigger. Because if you're driving around with low pressure on your tires, you're going to put your vehicle at some point off balance, and you will need to have a realignment. And most likely, when you get a realignment, they're going to tell you that you need tires, brakes, and rotors. And it's because you failed to address the smaller things. The smaller things now become more cost effective in the long run. Now, let's take money out of the equation. What would it be like if you were driving down the freeway at 75 miles an hour with low tire pressure? You didn't get the brakes, tires, or anything like that fixed, so you're a little off balance and you hit a pothole. You could have a blowout, and that blowout puts you in a head-on collision, which is something so unnecessary for not addressing the small things. Our foundational insights for today are anger is often caused by feelings of helplessness and the need to control situations, people, and consequences. When expressed in a healthy way, anger can foster personal growth, improve relationships, and change lives. Thank you for joining me here today in this session of anger management. Remember, anger is a natural emotion, but it doesn't have to control your life. By understanding and managing your anger, you can improve your relationships and connect more deeply with your loved ones. Thank you so much for joining me here today as we start this journey of understanding and managing anger together. Remember, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Until next time, stay blessed.